I was going to say good morning, but maybe it's actually good day. To some, good evening or late night. This week, we're focusing on community health assessment and improvement. To remind you of our specific charge once again, you were recently appointed administrator of a public health organization, and your governing body charges you to assess the capacity and improve the performance of this organization in order to achieve full accreditation within 3 years. We now have 75 days left on our timeline to produce a credible plan to achieve this goal. Tools this week focus on community health indicators and the criteria of a meaningful indicator and data synthesis and prioritization decision methods. We'll turn back to 2 of the case studies that we've already looked at this module. Before we forge ahead into becoming more community-minded and community-focused, I wanted to remind you of our overarching framework of this charge as well as of this course, and that is looking at the public health infrastructure and our public health system, reminding you that we're driven by the essential public health services as well as by the core functions of public health, of assessment, policy development, and assurance. Now jumping into the case studies of this module, digging deeper into their meaning, we'll start with the Gulf oil spill and then move into Wyandotte County. As the basis of your indicators, please be sure to closely look at the leading health indicators for Healthy People 2020. Each group should come up with at least one specific community health indicator that you believe should be incorporated into our scenario, the upcoming community health assessment process. A detailed justification is critical to this tool. So your justification should include a description of what the indicator will measure. For example, infant mortality. A description of what information the indicator might provide as to the health of your community in the aftermath of what was the Gulf oil spill disaster, and specific measures that you propose to use to measure this concept. So an example of a measure of infant mortality is the number of deaths in the first year of life per 1,000 births. The second piece of your tool should then describe 5 attributes or characteristics to establish meaningful community health indicator criteria. Let's look a little more closely at Healthy People 2020 leading topic areas and indicators. Some of these may be very relevant to assessing the aftermath of the Gulf oil spill. Do any jump out to you on this list? However, what other indicators, at least one, can your group add that would specifically tailor the assessment to the specific health issues that were caused directly and maybe indirectly by the spill? Once your group has agreed on a community health issue specific indicator, next, develop criteria to rate or evaluate the proposed indicator. Propose a list of the 5 most important attributes for an indicator of community health status. For example, what makes one indicator more meaningful and useful than another? The tool is your indicator, along with this list of 5 criteria for community health indicators. Be sure to upload this tool onto the respective group discussion board, as per always. Here's some criteria for you to review as you go through this process. Here's a list of examples from a technical aspect. And from a community perspective, determining if the indicator is meaningful, relevant, and actionable. Is it valid and accurate? It should be stable, reliable, and timely, as well as outcome-oriented, and of course, representative. So now we're going to switch gears, especially in terms of location, for this second module tool. Let's go back to Wyandotte County, and let's move forward in the process to prioritize the health problems within a community. So for our second Module 2 tool, we'll identify and rank the next 3 steps that should be taken to improve the health of the citizens of Wyandotte County. Steps should be implementable and sustainable, no matter what happens with healthcare reform implementation. At this point, I think we're sort of stable, so to speak. Justification of your list and your ranking is also required, of course. And remember that everything is on the table. You don't have to limit yourself to changes in the healthcare system per se. You should not only propose feasible next steps, but a broad array of local, state, and national resources can be considered. This next slide reminds us of some of the health-related issues from an ecological perspective that Wyandotte residents may be facing. I'll pause for a moment for you to look over these social determinants of health. And here are some potential interventions. I imagine that many of you will have touched on some of these issues and interventions in the conferencing exercise. There are multiple health issues in need of intervention in this community. So where do we start? Size, seriousness, intervention, effectiveness, and feasibility certainly serve as useful guiding principles when prioritizing health problems. And fortunately, we have some evidence-based strategies that can serve to guide us through a rigorous prioritization method. With your teams, please review these following slides and select which method your team will use to prioritize these 3 health issues in Wyandotte County. Let's get started with the first method that we'll propose, the 3-round multi-voting method. Step 1, fill in items to be prioritized under the health indicator column. Step 2, conduct 3 rounds of voting where every group member weighs in. Finally, tally the votes for each round in their respective column. And then you'll have your health priorities. The list that you see on the screen here provides some suggestions of prioritization criteria. For example, as you see, size, seriousness, trends, equity, intervention, feasibility, value, consequences of inaction, social determinant, and root cause. And what else would be on your list? Now moving on to the second method that you and your team can select, the 2x2 strategy grid. For this method, you'll start by filling in the blank spaces on each axis with the desired criteria. Make sure to label each quadrant according to the axes. Finally, you'll place competing programs or activities into the appropriate quadrant. Here's an example of how to use this tool if you choose severity and prevalence as your criteria. Then place your health problem in the respective and appropriate box to complete this method. And that's our second method to prioritize health issues of Wyandotte County. The third method that we're proposing is called the criteria matrix. Let's go back a few slides to where we observed some examples of criteria that we can study. You then create a code to rank the importance of each criteria, and at the end, tally your code to find out your prioritization order. You may use a blank table like this to conduct your criteria matrix method. The fourth method that we're proposing is the Hanlon Method Priority Score. You may follow the instructions below to conduct this with your group. And some more specific instructions in case your group decides to use this Hanlon method. Here's an example of what your table will look like once you come up with your health issues that you then will discuss for prioritization. And our final proposed method is a prioritization matrix, one of the most commonly used tools in identifying priorities, and can help if there are especially difficult priorities to choose from, or if an organization or community is restricted to only one priority health issue. This tool is ideal when health problems are considered among a large number of criteria. Follow the directions below to work through this method with your team if this is the method that you select to use for your health issue prioritization exercise. Here are some more detailed instructions that you may use, as well as an example of a prioritization matrix. Here's what the table will look like once you've identified the health issues that you plan to prioritize. And then the attributes will be given a score and tallied at the end. And here's the example of the blank table once you've identified the health issues that you plan to prioritize. After your team has determined the prioritization method that you prefer to use and arrived at a common short list of 3 possible next steps for Wyandotte County, work through this method as a team to determine your priorities. On the respective discussion board, you'll post 1. The 3 top health issues that your group decided to prioritize, and 2. For this team tool, it's important to include a justification that describes the prioritization method used and how and why your team arrived at these priorities. And 3, don't forget to also list the criteria used. I hope you enjoyed going through these exercises together. I think that they both provide a great deal of insight into how we, as public health practitioners, improve and maintain the health of our communities. I look forward to seeing what you come up with. Thank you.